Right, greetings, hello. It's Thomas here, Dr. Thomas Daffern. I'm speaking on the day of the French general election here in La Creuse, in the middle of France. Bonjour à tous. I'll be coming to, that issue during this talk. This is my monthly talk now. I was doing these once a week, but I'm too busy, to be honest, so I'm now doing them once a month, and I hope you enjoy this. This is my April talk. It's the last Sunday in April. Normally I'll do these talks the last Sunday of the month, and today is the 24th of April. So yes, greetings, and it's been it's been quite a ride this since I moved to France. And since Brexit and, now this war in Ukraine, and as I said in my talk last month on the 27th of March, I've been doing an awful lot of soul-searching and research. You see, I did my degree, my first degree in the University of London, School of Slavonic and East European Studies. I studied East European history, the Balkans. I won a prize for Balkan history. Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Greece. The last couple of hundred years of all that. And of course, me being me, I went right back into even prehistory. I was fascinated by Jim Butas's discoveries of old Balkan ancient goddess culture and etc. etc. I founded a philosophy society at CEAS. We looked at East European and Russian philosophy. It wasn't taken seriously. Still isn't really studied in British academia. Hardly at all. And I took the view that, hang on, we're having a Cold War with Russia and East Europe, and we're about to blow each other up with nuclear weapons. Shouldn't we at least study their philosophical teachings and traditions? I still think that's very important. This is why I launched Philosophers of Peace. So what do Philosophers of Peace do? Well, they study the philosophical teachings of each other's traditions, and they try and work out a synthesis. And they try and find the best bits of each other's traditions. I mean, today is the Orthodox Christian Easter. I used to belong to Anglican Orthodox peace group called the Fellowship of St Albans and St Sergius, which would meet in West London near where I was living. And, I'd go along to services. This was for theologians and academics who'd been inspired by East European, Russian, Orthodox, Greek thought, and Anglican, and, Western thought, Catholic, whatever, and trying to work out a synthesis. I'm still coming from that place. I still believe, I took the view then that the quarrel between Orthodox and Western Christians is actually a dispute over the Holy Spirit. Which, if you think about it, is totally bonkers, but it's true. It's about the procession of the Holy Spirit. It's a technical thing. I take the view that only the Holy Spirit can resolve this problem, and that the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Kodesh, is actually a universal spiritual wisdom energy that Christ somehow released to his disciples. We don't know the mystery of this. It came at Pentecost, the mystery of the flames above the head. That's kind of picture language, allegorical language for some very deep and profound mystical experience that these early disciples had, including my namesake, Thomas. I think we should be reverentially silent in the face of those kind of deep mysteries. But, I take the view that is the root of peace between Eastern and Western Europe, between Orthodox and Catholic and Anglican and Protestant culture. We have to go back to the Holy Spirit in a sense. I remember when I first read the Bible, I was in Canada in my youth, in my early 20s. And I remember sitting in my caravan in Calgary watching the snows in the winter going north and thinking, God, I can reach out and, in my mind's eye, touch the Arctic. And then if I turn a little to the left, I can go to Russia, the Kamchatka Peninsula, which abuts to Alaska. And, it's ridiculous that America and Russia should be enemies. I've always taken that view because I'm committed to the the perspective of the Holy Spirit, which brings enlightenment. You see, I think the Holy Spirit is the Shekinah in Judaism and the Kabbalah, and in Sufism, and it's the crown chakra, if you want, illuminated in Buddhism and Tantric studies. It's the higher gnosis that we're capable of, and that's what we should be actualizing to, not sending in military bomb squads to kill each other. And Putin has so lost the plot, I feel really sorry for him. If he wants to come here and take refuge in my Institute of Peace Studies here and escape Russia, I seriously recommend Putin resign like tomorrow, first declare peace and withdraw the troops, and then escape the country, because you're not going to be popular. You've ruined Russia. 200,000 jobs have gone in Moscow alone. Moscow, a city I know and love, you know, with its beautiful Kremlin. I've been there as a pilgrim and a seeker of wisdom when I was in Russia at philosophical conferences back in the 90s. And, you know, Putin, just resign, man. You've totally ruined that beautiful country of yours. You've killed lots of your own little young men who don't know what they're doing, and then you've killed these poor Ukrainians, the people of Mariupol and places, a beautiful city. You know, I have Ukrainian friends. Mariupol used to be a flourishing, beautiful, highly cultured city with many universities, theatres, opera house, and, you know, really thriving, beautiful city, a bit like Ljubljana, I imagine, which I know and love well. And now it's been reduced to rubble, Mr. Putin. I mean, this is absurd. This is not the Holy Spirit in action. This is the diabolical, whatever demonic forces have possessed you to do this, and your coterie, and I mean Dugan and, you know, all the people that think like him. You know, great Russia is going to attack and take over Europe and conquer them all. I mean, this is diabolical. It needs exercising. You know, you have very great shamans off in Russia, in the far Siberian part. Please, Mr. Dugan and Putin, go and get exercised, you know. In fact, I would say, Putin, my offer to house you is conditional on your being exercised first by some very powerful Siberian shamans. Then you can come here in refuge. And we can talk philosophy, because, you know, you obviously like philosophy, so let's have the conversations after your exorcism. And I'm just shocked at what they've been allowed to get away with, and the impotence of the UN. I mean, only now is the Secretary General saying, well, maybe I should go and mediate here. I mean, come on, what have you been doing for the last 55 days? If I'd been Secretary General of the UN, I would have flown immediately to Moscow and Kiev on the eve of the invasion. I mean, that's your job. I mean, what on earth are you doing? There are some legal arguments that Russia shouldn't actually have the seat that it has at the UN. It shouldn't be in the Security Council, because it claims to be the successor state of the old USSR legally. But actually that's never been ratified by the UN General Assembly. It was never accepted. You see, Ukraine has as much right as a successor state to the USSR to actually have the seat in the Security Council, as do the Stans, Kazakhstan and all that. They're all part of what used to be the USSR. Now that had the seat in the Security Council. Russia's claimed it, but I think illegitimately, and I think this Putin nonsense has shown that up. And I think some very clever lawyers in New York and in the UN should actually challenge Russia's right, because what it's doing is it's sitting there blocking all decent attempts to mediate and peace make. I think there's also been some confusion among people like in India who abstained from the UN General Assembly castigation of the Russian invasion, that they have this sort of old loyalty to the old USSR. They always used to love that. And so they were, you know, neutral in the conflict between West and East, USSR and USA. The trouble is that they're in this old romantic glow. Actually, Putin's Russia is not the old USSR. It's a fake horror show that is pinched bits of fascist ideology, pinched bits of Ivan Ilyin, pinched bits of Alexander Dugin and his crazy stuff that he's pinched from you know, geopolitical thinkers who who befuddled the Nazis. I mean, you know, they've been scraping the barrel of genuine intellectual life, and it's extremely the opposite of the Holy Spirit in action. And okay, so the war in Ukraine, yes, I've been active, you know, researching it, finding out about it. As I said last time, it's absolutely 100% certain that the people behind it, the Putin cabal, were also behind military intelligence attacks on the UK, severe, serious, major cyber attacks to brainwash the British people into voting for Brexit. As you know, if you've listened to my talks over the last couple of years, I've been so against Brexit, I'm fasting every Sunday. Today's another Sunday, so I fast all day. You know, it's also Ramadan, I'm fasting for Ramadan, so actually I'm doing a whole month of Sundays. And that's just my little spiritual protest against the madness of the world, against the madness of Brexit. First, that's when it started. But at least now I know why I'm protesting. You know, I thought the poor British people had just just gone mad. But now I know, no, they were brainwashed in a military campaign coordinated by Putin and his cabal. And if you don't believe me, you know, go and do the research. Email me, I'll send you a bibliography. I mean, this is now factual. This is provable in a court of law. It's not just theory. And not only that, but they also did the same in America in Trump's election campaign. Steve Bannon and his cronies. I mean, they thought they were very clever because they found a way of using Facebook to influence millions of people to vote for Trump and to vote for Brexit. And they're so ignorant that they thought that's clever. The fact they were being paid by the Mercers and Russian money coming to people like Farage and Aaron Banks and so on, they thought, this is, you know, I suppose these people convince themselves it's right because millions of pounds is flooding into their bank accounts, and so you can convince anyone anything if you pay them enough, if you're corruptible. True people are not corruptible because we know that we're working in a tiny little aperture of time called, you know, a human lifespan, which is nothing, and that we're answerable to the courts of not just history but our own onward soul journey. As Kant said, there is a judgment after death, as all the religions say, and we have to face the karma of what we've done. We have to give account to our creator, stroke creators, however you want to conceive that. And I'm very interested, as you probably know, in near-death experience. I mean, the evidence is huge, overwhelming, and again, I think provable in a court of law that we do survive death, and our conscience, our consciousness, therefore, has to say what we've done. I mean, what people like Putin and these mass killers of history like Stalin and Genghis Khan and Hitler and, you know, all the rest of them, you know, it can't be a very... It can only be a very tragic experience for them. Yes, so best to avoid doing massacres, human rights abuse, rape, the kinds of things they're doing in the Russian army. I mean, it's shocking. Now, you know, Putin's squad of brainwashers are out there saying, no massacres, no human rights abuse, no rape, it's all fake, it's all American propaganda, you know. Sorry, I've looked at the evidence, I've researched this, I've read the articles in all the press, I've looked at the photographs, I have colleagues that are there. I mean, politicians have gone there, fact finders, people from the European Union, you know, the authorities have been to check, and no, these are factual, and the International War Crimes Court, based in The Hague, is now officially investigating because these are war crimes that have been committed. And I've watched poor women giving testimony about, you know, being raped and so on by Russian squaddies. I mean, this is why I've been against war all my life. I started as an you know, as a conscientious objector, even when I was at Brighton Hove and Sussex Grammar School. I felt there was something wrong about the way that the military used to come into our grammar schools in England and get young kids to march around in uniform, learning how to shoot guns and stuff. I'd read enough by then about the horrors of war, World War II, you know, etc. World War One, and so I just felt something wrong in this. So I became what's called a conscientious objector. I used to spend the afternoon every week when the other kids would do martial games on the fields. I would go and read in the library, and so I've been a conscientious objector ever since about the age of 12 or 13, and I'm not going to stop now. War is wrong. Because it brings out this bestiality, which is latent in all of us. But touch wood, it never comes out in most people. But some people have to be, to fight a war, they're trained to become killers. They're desensitized. And if you look at the psychology of killing, as my friend Kacheni Singh and I did in our course on non-killing recently, there's been very detailed psychological studies of how killing is fostered, the instinct to kill, which is not there innately in people. Yeah, we will fight in self-defense. That's something that is there in the human psyche, but we won't deliberately go out and kill strangers. You have to be trained for that and brainwashed, and that's what these poor Russian soldiers have been brainwashed with. But so anyway, I've been busy this last month, and I'm sharing with you a few of the thoughts and work I've done. I also wrote a long piece about the missing dimension of violence, which is what I call intellectual violence. I was at a very important book launch of the World Encyclopedia of Violence, Conflict and Peace, in which I wrote the article on peace building and peacemaking. And there were many experts from around the world. It was very brilliantly chaired by Lester Kurtz, professor at George Mason University, colleague of mine, and it was sobering and brilliant. One of the many great speakers was a beautiful South African woman who has been Deputy Minister of Education and Deputy Minister of Defence in South Africa. She now runs the Quaker office to the UN, which is based in Geneva. Amazing woman. Hats off to her. And she'd written articles for the encyclopedia and extraordinary, deep stuff. But I felt that what these kind of encyclopedias are always old by the time they're published. Although this one is really up to date. And if you are an academic, if you have access to librarians, tell them to get a copy for your library, But it doesn't, what I think what scholars in the field of conflict resolution have failed to realise hitherto is actually wars begin in the minds of men. That's what the UNESCO Constitution says. And so that's what needs analysing deeply. That's why I did my piecework on psychohistory and transpersonal history, because I think that it's in the mind of man that violence starts, and it begins at the level of intellectual violence. Dugin, Putin, these Russian cabals, they have this intellectual violence against the West. They think they're justified because, they brainwash themselves to think the problem with the world is democracy. They think it's too feminine. They think the problem with the world is homosexuality because it's too feeble, and they've got this sort of masculinist story going on, that the strong man is the hero, and Putin likes to have pictures of himself doing judo and all that stuff. They've got lost in a world of intellectual violence, which is ultimately intellectual self-violence, because as these people, and the SS types, the world is full of these SS types that brainwash themselves that killing Jews or killing Ukrainians or killing the whatever is in God's interest, and therefore you've got to be a strong man to do this. And the guards that did the Holocaust against the Jews, they'd psyched themselves up into thinking they were doing God's work, by mass killing 6 million Jews. That's how deluded human beings can be if you're brainwashed. And that's why I'm so against this Ukrainian attack. But I'm against the cyber war, the intellectual war that Russia's been waging. Now they're waging it against themselves. Intellectuals aren't allowed to speak out in Russia. I wouldn't be allowed to be sitting here saying this if I was in Russia, which is just up the road as far as I'm concerned. I've been there. I know Moscow. I love it, I could be teaching a class at the university, but no, I'd be arrested and stuck in prison for 15 years for saying this. Well, that's totally wrong. That's just that's so retrograde, it's just beyond a joke. I mean, we can do better than that. You know, I mean, I love Russia because it's the land of Tolstoy, it's the land of Turgenev, who was a friend of George Sand, who lived up the road here in France. I love Russia because of its tremendous history of intellectual, academic, spiritual work for truth. I mean, you know, I admire the Russian intensity. I'm a great fan of Berdyaev, and I'm reading his book on the origins of Russian communism at the moment, rereading it. You know, and he's extremely good on all Russian intellectual traditions, but how Putin got into power is just absolutely beyond me. What were my colleagues thinking of by letting him get into power? Well, I think he got in because he's a thug and a bully, and I think he's used terror tactics and fear. And I think if you don't agree with him, he puts you in prison or assassinates you. I mean, there were some Russian oligarchs in Spain recently hacked to death in their villa. I'm sure that was on the orders of Putin. I mean, not a nice man. And no wonder he likes Assad, who's been doing the same to his Muslim population, who don't agree with his heavy arm tactics. And Assad was using chemical weapons on his people, and Russia supported that and reduced Aleppo and other cities to total rubble, like they've done to Mariupol. So, you know, gosh, we have a long way to go, people, to get back to any kind of decency on this planet. Today's a crunch time here in France because we have the general election. I'm recording this on the day of the general election. I don't get to vote in France, so I can't, but I would be voting for Macron, 100%. He's been, I think, an excellent president. He's a highly intelligent young man. And he represents a sort of moderate position, but he's fiercely in defence of French values, égalité, which is a very important concept here in France, you know, the equality of citizens under the law. There's none of this sort of class-based structure you get in England, where if you are a lord with a manor house, you have more rights than a little peasant who, you know, is living on the streets. No, in France, everybody's equal, actually. Liberté is the other great concept that here in France is so important. We do have freedom of speech. That's why I can speak to you. That's why I'm not arrested. We have freedom of conscience. You can follow your own religious promptings. You can be a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Catholic, a Protestant, whatever you want, an atheist, a Marxist, a Taoist, you know, a Druid. And behind me on the wall, I've got my periodic table of the world's religions. I mean, I have people coming around the museum here who love this. They understand what I'm doing. The average French man and woman who pops into this museum gets it within 10 minutes of explaining. Here's the first ever diagram or map of all the world's religions. And it's like the penny drops and they say, well, you know, that's really helpful, thank you. Or, that's obvious, why hasn't it been done before? The problem is, you know, we have all these religious wars are going on because we have lack of religious and spiritual literacy. We're fighting each other. I mean, the Russians attacked Ukraine because they're the wrong kind of Orthodox. I mean, what? You know, Putin and his KGB patriarch Kirill in Moscow, they think they're the right Orthodox and the Ukrainians are the wrong Orthodox, because the Ukrainians have their own autonomous church directly under Bartholomew, who's the grand patriarch of all the Orthodox communions. And instead of being polite and accepting that our Ukrainian brethren have a right to a different church structure under their patriarch, no, we're going to go and kill them all. I mean, how, oh dear, you know, it's just so puerile. It reminds me of gang warfare on the streets of, I don't know, you know, some Caucasus town in the days of Stalin, when he started his career as a gangster leader in Tiflis and Yerevan and places. He was literally a gangster leader. Do we want to go back to those days? I don't think so. So anyway, good luck to Macron. He's done some really important things. He created the Paris Peace Forum, which I think probably had a little role in helping. It's a showcase of thinkers coming together from all over the world, actors, NGO leaders, corporate sector, scientists and so on, every November to discuss world peace and global politics. Long may it flourish, and I hope sincerely he's re-elected and that can go on. The alternative is this woman, Le Pen, who is actually, we know, fed by the same streams that gave us Brexit and Putin's war on Ukraine. I mean, she's in hock to the tune of millions of pounds to Putin's oligarchy. And her ideas are generated in the same thought world. So I listened to the debate between Macron and Le Pen, and Macron was there, articulate, intelligent, saying he believes in the European project, the European Union, he also believes in fraternity, which is the third of the qualities that here in the French Republic we take very seriously. There's liberté, égalité, and fraternité, which is essentially love, friendship. If you see somebody in the street, you're polite to them. Here in France, people say bonjour, even to strangers walking in the streets. Certainly in the rural parts. I don't think you could do it in Paris because you're passing hundreds every minute. But here in France, I mean, people like each other. They're kind, they're polite. If I run out of sugar, I can pop next door and of course, here's some sugar, Thomas, There's none of this sort of antipathy towards other human beings that some cultures have. So, sorry, little pause here. So anyway, in the debate, so Macron was talking about the kind of vision he has for France, which is part of this bigger European project of countries living in peace. In the EU system, we don't go to war anymore. France and Germany and Austria and Spain, they used to fight wars after wars after wars, and Britain and England and Scotland, it was all just like wars for centuries. Well, no, the EU's put a stop to all that. It all culminated in World War II when there was horrendous stuff going on. And now the European Union came into being to end all that. It is the biggest and most important peace project in world history, in my opinion. And it supports the kind of Nordic peace model. The Nordic nations haven't been to war for a long time, and apart from Norway, they're all members of the EU, and that's great. And Macron understands this. He's a clever man. He says, I believe in this project. I want people to feel European citizens. Now, I certainly do. I'm a European citizen. I'm British. I have a British passport, but I live here in France. I've lived in Wales, in Scotland. I love all these different cultures and their independence. I've travelled all around France and Europe. I've spent time in Germany and Austria and Spain and Italy and Greece and the Balkans. And there's nowhere in Europe I don't feel I belong. I can go to Athens and feel I've come home. I'm at home. I can go to Spain and feel the same. I can go to former Yugoslavia, Slovenia, places like I've been to Belgrade and Romania and so on. So I understand why. I thank you, Mr. Macron, for knowing there is such a thing as being a European citizen. Now I'm proud and honoured to live here in France. I'd love to be a French citizen one day. But at least I can live here because of the European Union, because of my country used to be a member, so I just sneaked in time. Now my daughters, my English daughters, cannot come and live here anymore, and nor can all the other people that might one day have wanted to, because of the stupidity of Putin's Brexit, which I hope to be reversed in short order, and I'm going to come to that point shortly. But what did Le Pen say? She said rudely, she can't speak in a nice way, she's a rude person, although Macron was quite feisty, he wasn't letting her get away with it. She said, well, no such thing as European citizen, what does that mean? No, there's nothing like that, it's just you're French citizen, Spanish, blah, 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 So the nuances, the subtleties of identity escape this woman. She has not an intellect that's capable of saying, Catalonian, yeah, Barcelona people, they're Europeans actually, aren't they? They're in the state of Spain, but they're actually Europeans. Scots, yeah, they're kind of part of the UK, but they're more like Europeans, aren't they? And the Luxembourgers and the people of, Flanders and the people of Brittany and the Pyrenees people and northern Italy and southern Italy and Sicily, all the different shades of what it means to be a European. Marine Le Pen doesn't get it. She's just like, no, nationalist. There's a sort of, let's go back to the day when you had to be just this one thing, a French citizen, a French person. Macron, thank God, is like light years ahead of that. And then Le Pen tried to also say, no, but I want France for the French. I want France to be the great power again that it used to be. I don't know what she wants, sort of little Napoleon type woman that wants to go and conquer other countries. I mean, Macron just pointed out that France is great because of its soft power. I mean, it is a superpower. It does have, one of the biggest armies in the world. It has nuclear weapons. I mean, it is a hard power. But why France is important is because of its cultural power. Because people love France. They come here. They love Paris. They love the culture of France. They love French poetry and cinema and music and romance and literature and the weather and the wine and the food and the French people. It's the culture of civilization that France stands for. That's why it's a great power. And that's why it spread, to my hometown of Montreal and Canada and many parts of the world. And so Macron was saying, no, we're not going to go back down that route of trying to become a great power again through this sort of narrow nationalist route. We already are a world power. And Macron pointed out he's been trying to help in Africa and help with, nation building and solving some of the civil war problems that have been going on there. And will continue to do so, So, anyway, it was a very interesting debate. I sincerely pray and hope that Macron wins today and that the French people assert their right to intelligence, which is the fourth of the four qualities that France stands for. There was liberty, equality and fraternity. And a man called La Ponnerie, a great intellectual who was a sort of socialist, said, we forgot intelligence. Because to make a true country, a true republic, you also need intelligence. And that's the problem with how people like Putin could take power, or Hitler, because by keeping people deliberately ignorant, by feeding them propaganda, not allowing them to see all sides of a problem. The Jains say you have to see all sides. And it can't father to even begin to get to the truth of things. Well, no, if you deny that and you show them only one truth, then, like lemmings, they'll just follow that one truth. And so intelligence is the most important, well, they're all important. Liberty, equality, love, and intelligence, or wisdom. So, vive la République, I would say, and let's hope they show their collective intelligence today by voting decisively against this neo-fascist in the pay of Putin. I want to come just to say a couple of things I've been doing this week since we last talked. It's been St George's Day in Britain, and I'm a great, lover of St George, actually. When I was little, we used to act at home and make up little plays, and we had this sweet little book with a play about St George. I remember at Christmases we used to enact it, me and my family and friends, when I was 8 or 9. And I just want to say that St George is a very